Archaeologists were wrong about the Amazon. For years, this rainforest was painted as an untouched wilderness, incapable of supporting complex societies. But new tools are pulling back the canopy and revealing plazas, roads, and engineered soils. It's less of a pristine rainforest and more of a human-shaped landscape. We're only now beginning to discover the lost cities it's been hiding. And in this video, I want to bring awareness to these mysteries and show how archaeological paradigms can always shift. More specifically, we'll explore outdated myths about the Amazon, the technology that's debunking them, and some truly mind-blowing sites. I'll even take you with me to make our own discovery. So let's dive in. For most of the 20th century, the Amazon was seen as a counterfeit paradise. This phrase came from archaeologist Betty Meggers, who argued that the rainforest's poor soils could never support large, complex societies. Her main claim was that the ground was simply too acidic and nutrient-poor to sustain intensive, long-term agriculture. But she elaborated on her doubts even further, arguing 4 additional points. First, the absence of durable stone meant many tools and weapons were made from wood or other perishable materials, which rarely survive in the archaeological record. Second, only long-term, sedentary settlements produce notable soil modifications, so short-term camps leave minimal or ephemeral signatures that are hard to detect after millennia. Third, frequently shifting rivers, sedimentation, and landscape change have buried, eroded, or displaced any ancient settlements. And fourth, thick vegetation and dense canopy mask surface evidence. Because of this, she says that most ancient New World finds come from arid regions or protected under rock shelters, not from the Amazon. So she viewed the Amazon as a natural museum more than a cultural museum. But Meggers wasn't alone. Other 20th century archaeologists continued her thread. They pointed to sparse artifact scatters, poorly preserved sites, and the apparent absence of large architecture as evidence for small mobile populations, rather than dense sedentary communities. Slash and burn farming was framed as the only viable agricultural strategy. The problem is that this is a short-term, low-impact strategy, and it's pretty much incompatible with urban complexity. The result was a dominant narrative. The Amazon is a fragile, lightly used wilderness where only modest migrating human groups could survive, and that they left little behind. That view shaped archaeology for decades, steering scholars away from searching for large settlements and toward models of low population and ephemeral occupation. It was a world of barely perceptible human disturbance, according to some. This myth of the pristine Amazon became the default paradigm. However, these people were dismissing reports written by early explorers. Meggers and others claimed that any sophisticated settlements reported by early Europeans must have been exaggerations or misreadings of natural features, or that they were short-lived experiments doomed to collapse. But those reports were more insightful than they knew. Conquistadors like Francisco de Orellana described bustling towns along the Amazon River in the 1500s. His crew pushed into a rainforest that, to European imaginations, should have been empty. Yet, the scenes they recorded were crowded and organized. Orellana and his companion, Gaspar de Carvajal, described stretches of riverbank lined with large cities, well-developed roads, monumental construction, and dense populations. Where Europeans expected to find primitive camps, they found human-built environments. Imagine sailing on that ship, and what it must have been like to encounter a people, an entire world, unlike anything you've ever seen. It must have been equally mind-bending to be an indigenous Amazonian, witnessing this European vessel sail through your territory. Their descriptions paint a vivid picture of large-scale social organization. Whether every detail is literal or filtered through 16th century eyes, the observation is clear. The Amazon they claim to have encountered did not match the speculation of later archaeologists. Now, in the 20th century, we have far more data to sparse out which of these camps was more accurate. And the preponderance of evidence suggests that people like Orellana and Carvajal may not have been exaggerating after all. One of Meggers' main arguments was that the dense forest obscures any remnants of past societies. This was a major issue in the mid-1900s. but it's largely been resolved. We can thank a new technology known as LiDAR for solving that problem. So what is it? LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and you can think of it like an X-ray for the landscape. Aircraft like drones fire millions of laser pulses at the ground and time their return to build detailed 3D maps. These pulses can fire at a rate of hundreds of thousands per second, yielding centimeter-level accuracy. Some sensors use near-infrared, others use green light to map shallow water. But its archaeological power is in its ability to see through vegetation. While many pulses hit leaves, enough find gaps to register the ground and reveal anomalies, like mounds, roads, terraces, and walls. Invented in 1961, LiDAR now surveys the globe. When used over vast forests like the Amazon, it can point to where we should dig, saving time, effort, and danger. So let's take a look at some of the most interesting LiDAR discoveries in recent years, then see if we can find something ourselves. A good example comes from Bolivia. Here, the Casarabe culture lived from about 400 AD to 1400 AD, predating European contact. Archaeologists were already familiar with a few sites in the northern part of the country associated with this culture. They showed that these pre-Columbian people practiced a combination of hunting, fishing, and maize agriculture. They established an impressive number of settlements and earthworks that spread from the rainforest to the savanna. An intriguing network of canals and causeways was also documented. However, the scale of these settlements was not yet put into perspective. Then, researchers mapped vast expanses of the Casarabe culture using LiDAR and published their results in 2022. The images are stunning. They revealed just how enormous two of the main settlement centers truly are. The sites are known as Kotoka and Landiva, and they're about 150 and 315 hectares respectively. They're both surrounded by moats and ramparts. Defense systems like this usually imply there was some threat of conflict between people living in the area, though we don't have direct evidence of that here. The architecture within the settlements consists of huge U-shaped earthen platforms and 20-meter-tall conical pyramids, sitting atop 6 meters of artificial terrace. The soil used to build them was excavated from areas adjacent to the features themselves. Interestingly, the buildings are mostly oriented to the north-northwest, and the researchers suggest that this probably reflects a cosmological worldview, which is also present in the orientation of burials of the Casarabe culture. Smaller sites cluster around larger centers and can be organized into tiers based on their size. Sites of various sizes are connected by causeways. These paths are visibly straight and extend deep into the rainforest. Some of them have gaps and intersections, which are believed to have been stations for controlling who had access to the settlements. Could this be more evidence of group conflict? What do you think? Their reservoirs and canals were huge too. One canal runs 7 kilometers. It brought water from Laguna San Jose to Kotoka. Feats of infrastructure like this should give you an idea of how intensive these land modifications were. These people were implementing large-scale labor to achieve large-scale land and water management. The researchers framed the Casarabe settlement system as a form of low-density urbanism, with a sophistication that is comparable to that of Andean cultures. Their findings overturn assumptions that Amazonia was empty and unsuited to complex societies. Instead, the Casarabe culture constructed monumental architecture, integrated settlements of various sizes, and partook in sophisticated landscape engineering. Importantly, this study also stretches our definition of urban life. It teaches us that cities can be diffuse, green, and intimately tied to managed ecosystems. Archaeologist Stefan Rostein has fully embraced this idea. He's conducted one of the most recent breakthroughs in Amazonian LiDAR, publishing it in 2024. His research is focused on Ecuador, at a site even older than the Casarabe settlements. So what has he discovered? Well, according to him, he's found evidence of green urbanism. Let's explore what he means by this. Rostein combined LiDAR and 2 decades of fieldwork to expose a vast pre-Columbian network in the Upano Valley of Amazonian Ecuador. He and his colleagues mapped 300 square kilometers of jungle along the banks of the Upano River. What they found would have been familiar to the eyes of Orellana and Carvajal. They discovered thousands of earthen platforms grouped into standardized residential complexes, monumental cores, and communal plazas. Plus, they found a spectacular road network linking sites across the valley. Over 6,000 platforms appear in the LiDAR, with 15 clusters recognized as towns. Among those towns are core complexes like Sangay, Quilamape, and Copueno. One of the main reasons why he refers to this as green urbanism is because agriculture was built into the landscape as if it were pre-planned. Drained fields, plots of land with right angles, terraces and canals fill the gaps between platforms. Deliberate water control and high-yield farming are the only explanations for many of these features. There are even artificially flattened hills, with access trails leading up their slopes and structures built atop. Of notable interest to the researchers are the trail and road networks. They identified 4 different types. Most common are the straight dug footpaths and roads. They're about 2 to 3 meters deep and probably resulted from digging up and pushing dirt on either side. The 2 longest are 14 and 25 kilometers. They connect distant settlements, but likely even extend beyond the study area. The other road types were built in specific ways to navigate more hilly terrain or to use already existing natural channels. Overall, the terraforming associated with these endeavors is far beyond what archaeologists have historically credited to Amazonian natives. Actual archaeological excavations have painted a lively picture of what everyday life was like here. Post holes, caches, and hearth features were found in residential areas. So too were large storage jars, grinding stones, and charred seeds. These artifacts speak to the cooking practices of these ancient people. Starch residue found in pottery confirms that maize, beans, and sweet potato made up their agrarian diets. They even found micro traces on starch grains, indicating that they were manufacturing chicha beer, a traditional alcoholic beverage common to South American cultures. They were probably brewing and drinking it communally, and possibly in ritualistic settings. On top of that, intentional artifact deposits suggest rituals were woven into daily life. In short, the material record reveals how people were living, and the LiDAR reveals the scale at which they were living. And this was occurring thousands of years ago. Radiocarbon dates and soil analyses have revealed that mound building began here around 500 BC, and this was followed by major renovations taking place throughout the following centuries, before the settlements came to a close around 1200 AD. So, the authors framed this complex of sites as garden urbanism, a dispersed urban setting woven into the broader jungle ecosystem, and supported by agriculture. Rostein's LiDAR work flips the script once again. The Amazon wasn't an untouched void waiting for history. It was built, farmed, and organized at scale. Looking more broadly at the Amazon as a whole, it appears that these sites in Bolivia and Ecuador are not isolated anomalies. In addition to expanding on previously known sites, brand new sites have also been discovered using LiDAR. One study published in 2023 scanned over 5,000 square kilometers of Amazonian rainforest and identified numerous previously unreported sites. The data was originally collected to measure forest biomass, but these researchers used it to uncover 24 new earthworks scattered across the Amazon. They appear in 4 distinct zones, each with its own signature. In the upper Xingu, they found a fortified plaza town. It appears to be part of a broader pattern of dense road-linked settlements, not too dissimilar from what we've seen in Bolivia and Ecuador. To the southwest, the landscape is dotted with large geoglyphs. These include rectangular and circular earthworks. They are typically located on flat, well-drained plateaus near rivers. On the Guiana Shield, they detected sites ranging from permanent mountain habitations to ceremonial areas along the coast of Amapé, Brazil. The ceremonial areas consist of megalithic structures arranged in circular clusters. Finally, in the central Amazonian floodplains, they identified earthworks specific to riverine settings. While these are a little less obvious, their unusually straight geometry suggests they are of human construction. Also, repeated flooding and sediment buildup may have buried smaller features here, leaving only the largest elements visible. Importantly, features similar to these have been found elsewhere and have been tied to pre-Columbian fishery systems. Across these 4 regions, LiDAR's ability to reveal straight lines, regular shapes, and organized layouts makes a strong case for widespread human modification. However, the total area they surveyed only amounted to about 0.08% of the Amazon, so the researchers wanted to take it a step further. They used their data to create a statistical model predicting sites across the entire rainforest. That model suggests there could be up to 23,000 more earthworks that have yet to be discovered. This means that our currently documented sites represent only 4 to 9% of the total. Up to 96% remain hidden. Additionally, it highlighted particular hotspots in southwestern Amazonia. These tend to be areas of warmer, drier seasonality, clayey soils, and plateaus close to rivers. The authors concluded with this. They say, considering the widespread extent of locations modified by pre-Columbian management and cultivation practices, Amazonia can be viewed as an ancient social ecological system with long-term responses to climate change, more similar to old secondary forests than pristine climax ecosystems. They serve as tangible proof of an ancestor's occupation, way of life, and their relationship with the forest. The numbers proposed in this study are staggering, tens of thousands of sites waiting to be discovered, and they probably hold the answers to so many of our questions. It seems like the more we look, the more lost cities we find. So just out of curiosity, let's see if we can poke around ourselves and find something interesting. For those of you who don't know, I'm a professional archaeologist in the Mid-Atlantic United States, but I've never done work in the Amazon before. So I'm definitely not going to pretend to be the expert here. That said, I use things like historic maps, aerial photography, and LiDAR quite a bit. So I'm just going to kind of jump in and scroll around. I'm using a website called Caltopo, which has this open access LiDAR data anyone can use. Let's jump into the Amazon, zoom in, and turn on the LiDAR. Just from general archaeological experience, I'll probably focus on waterways because people tend to live near water almost universally. But other than that, I don't know my way around the Amazon whatsoever. As you can see, most of this terrain is pretty even and monotonous, but you can definitely see certain depressions representing rivers and valleys and things like that. It also helps to swap back and forth between LiDAR and normal color imagery, just to help orient yourself. This could take some time, so I'm gonna do some searching and get back to you. This braided river caught my attention, and from this imagery we can see that there are some modern developments and roads alongside it. This kind of tells me that it could be promising. So this was actually a bit faster than I was anticipating. I followed a tributary that feeds that braided stream and ran into a few more small buildings and neighborhoods. Another cool feature on Caltopo is turning on the structures layer. This sort of lets you see the footprints of already documented buildings. And as you can see, there are a few along this tributary. But just to the northwest, I ended up finding some anomalies on the landscape that aren't identified as structures. Now, if I switch to the imagery, you can see they are totally covered by foliage. Switching back, they really don't look like natural features. Whereas much of the surrounding terrain is kind of flat or rolling and not too steep, the dark green and kind of orange colors tell us these slopes are pretty abrupt. Also, look at the geometry. This northernmost feature is nearly square. Here we have almost a right angle. It looks like it may have been enclosed at one point, but the other two sides are missing. This one definitely caught my attention. It's sort of U-shaped and faces sort of north-northwest, just like those mountains in Bolivia. And this is, I guess, the last big feature. It's pretty linear, and the slight curvature it does have is almost symmetrical from the center. Oh, and another thing you can do with this is see changes in elevation. So if I move my cursor to the base of one of these things, you can see it jumps from about 175 feet above sea level to 260 feet. So there's quite a bit of elevation gain, especially when compared to the surrounding landscape. Here we can see a difference of about 120 feet. All in all, I can't say for sure that these are the ruins of a lost Amazonian city. But as a professional archaeologist, would I say it's a site worth investigating further? Most definitely. Let me know what you guys think though, in the comments section. Did we just stumble upon some ruins? Or could they be explained naturally? Maybe there's a geologist out there who can help us with our assessment. Also, let me know if you enjoyed this little segment. It's not something I do often on my channel, but if you guys like to explore LiDAR and Google Earth, things like that, I can certainly start doing more of it. Maybe we could even find some sites to visit in person in the future. After all, actually going to a site and investigating it at ground level is what really opens your eyes. To see it from the human level is totally unmatched. And while all these discoveries being made from the sky are super important, on-the-ground fieldwork is just as essential, if not more. And there is one area of Amazonian fieldwork I think we need to elaborate on. Archaeologists and researchers from the 20th century claimed that the soils of the Amazon were too poor to sustain large-scale agriculture. It was a key argument for why they suspected only hunter-gatherers lived in the rainforest. Yet, we now had these areas of quote-unquote green urbanism that probably had decent-sized populations. How can we reconcile these conflicting observations? The answer lies in Terra Preta, also known as Amazonian dark earth. Terra Preta is the black gold of the Amazon. It's a supersoil made by indigenous Amazonians as far back as 2,500 years ago. Over centuries, people accumulated charred wood, ash, bone, pottery shards, food scraps, and other household waste into piles and pits. After mixing with the existing soil, a dark carbon-rich layer is created. It's full of pyrogenic carbon, which is essentially ancient charcoal, and other concentrated nutrients like phosphorus and calcium. These elements are what tropical soils usually lack. So this unique layer is deep and fertile while the surrounding soils remain nutrient poor. Terra Preta is also remarkably resilient. Its high organic content, near neutral pH, and nutrient stores are stable over time. In fact, it was used by colonial Europeans for agriculture long after native inhabitants vanished. Basically, it's an engineered soil that creates pockets of productive farmland. Fieldwork has discovered Terra Preta at archaeological sites across the Amazon. One site, known as Hatahara, can give us a glimpse into the full life cycle of this soil. Hatahara sprawls across roughly 16 hectares of river bluff, and it tells a long, layered story. The site stacks 3 ceramic traditions. Manakapuru ceramics are the oldest, appearing in the lower soil layers. Paredao ceramics are next, and they're pretty widespread throughout the site. And Warita ceramics are the most recent, appearing near the ground surface. Radiocarbon dates place the core occupations between the 7th century AD and the end of the first millennium, though older traces exist. These cultural layers are evidence of people using the same landscape for generations. Archaeological preservation here is honestly exceptional. Fieldwork has revealed hearths, pits, fish and turtle bones, and even 11 human burials beneath earthen mounds. Researchers mapped a total of 10 mounds. Each is about 1 to 2 meters high with a flat top. At least some appear to have been constructed in only one or a few intensive episodes, which would have demanded quick, coordinated labor. A major component of the site is its dense Terra Preta. Today, it's planted with papaya, so it's still clearly productive. But it's set into surrounding soils called oxysols and latisols, which are actually very infertile. Those soils are typical of tropical environments. They're deep and usually consist of a stark yellow or red hue. This is because of their high iron and aluminum oxide content. A very thin layer of organic material is formed on the surface from falling plants. However, it's quickly drained of its nutrients because of the immense rainfall, humidity, and plant absorption. And so this leaves a nutrient-poor soil, horrible for agriculture. For those who lived at Hatahara, Terra Preta was how they combated this problem. But there's more to it than that. Terra Preta served multiple purposes for these people. First and foremost, it played its role in agriculture. Builders then used it as fill material to construct their mounds, which gives us an idea of how much of it there really was. Sacrificing such fertile soil to build mounds wouldn't have done anyone any favors if the supply was limited, so to do so implies that it must have been abundant in the area. Warita ceramics on top of mounds indicate ceremonial reuse during later times. After the site was finally abandoned, the forest started to grow back. However, limited root disturbance shows that it never fully reclaimed the site. So the life cycle of Terra Preta was one of consistent recycling and repurposing, at least at Hatahara. Now let's go more macro. Given the expanding evidence of lost cities in the Amazon, researchers have begun plotting the extent of Terra Preta. How widespread are these soils? One model, using what we know about over 700 documented Terra Preta sites, predicts that it makes up about 3.2% of the rainforest, or about 154,000 square kilometers. That study got even more specific, suggesting that these soils are concentrated in central and eastern forests along major rivers. Western Amazonia showed less potential, however, and they suggest that this is because those soils are naturally more fertile, as they are derived from the Andes. This further supports the idea that Terra Preta is an adaptation specific to the depths of the Amazon. So it's not everywhere, but where it does exist, it's a clear footprint of sustained occupation. Studying Terra Preta also gives us an idea of how many people were living in the ancient Amazon. Based on the extent and productivity of these soils, it's estimated that the pre-Columbian population could have numbered around 8 million people. And these millions of people probably displayed an array of cultures and traditions we have yet to unearth. Researchers now argue that the Amazon was no less socioculturally diverse or populous than other tropical forested areas of the world prior to European conquest. It's so exciting to ponder what cultural nuances we'll discover in the future. And equally fascinating is the diversity of plants domesticated to nourish these cultures. It turns out that Amazonia was a global hotspot of plant domestication, largely due to that Terra Preta. Throughout the Holocene, indigenous people domesticated at least 83 native species, including maize, sweet potato, cacao, peppers, and palms. Domestication happened slowly. First, people tended and managed wild plants in small gardens. They did this by protecting, planting, and selecting the best ones. Over generations, those plants changed to fit people's needs. They become more useful and sometimes even dependent on humans to survive and reproduce. This is called incipient domestication. It's actually an evolutionary process where the human selection of plants leads to gradual genetic divergence from their fully wild counterparts. By around 4,000 years ago, communities largely shifted to settled farming, leaving behind a botanical footprint. Forests near archaeological sites are richer and more abundant in domesticated plant species. One study shows that domesticated plants are 5 times more likely to be found around these sites than non-domesticated plants. The impact these ancient Amazonians had on their environment cannot be overstated. So the outdated idea of a pristine Amazon has been debunked. Our new understanding describes a patchwork of lost cities, engineered soils, and domesticated plants, much of which has been revealed by LiDAR. These discoveries tell us how the forest has been shaped by human hands, but mapping the past is only the start. Today, AI and other technology are speeding up research efforts even more, pointing archaeologists where to dig even faster. AI and machine learning can use high-powered computation and pattern recognition to scan LiDAR imagery and detect things like straight lines, mounds, causeways, and disrupted canopies. And its advantage is its speed. What would take humans weeks to spot could be done with AI in a matter of hours or less. We can use these technologies to more easily combine satellite images, archaeological records, and ecological clues to make predictions. Deep learning models can then pick out faint earthworks that are hard to see by eye and then build 3D models to explore these virtually. Even more impressive is how these models learn from experience and continuously get faster and more efficient. Taken together, these tools help narrow our search, save time, and turn noisy data into precise leads. Interestingly, the most dominant AI company in the world has already taken initiative here. Earlier this year, OpenAI, the company that built ChatGPT, launched its OpenAI to Z challenge. It was a global competition, inviting participants to harness their latest AI models to uncover previously unknown archaeological sites in the Amazon. The award for the most creative and impactful approach was $250,000, plus fieldwork support and collaboration opportunities with archaeologists. Multiple teams took part, were judged by professionals, and the results have been announced. The challenge produced dozens of new archaeological leads. The winning team, known as Blackbean, flagged 67 patches of 1 square mile with high archaeological probability. They trained deep learning models on LiDAR, satellite layers, and ChatGPT-4 to learn patterns from known sites. The flagged patches sit near rivers, floodplains, and other water sources. But of course, this is only the beginning, and fieldwork is needed. The results don't prove every patch is a site, but they give dozens of high-priority targets, making field surveys faster and more focused. But speed brings risk. Models can expose sites to looters, reproduce sampling biases, or make sweeping generalizations without proper excavations. Responsible AI must include transparent methods, indigenous and local partnerships, and careful publication practices. It can be done right by not publishing exact coordinates, contacting local communities first, and prioritizing protection. So AI won't replace archaeologists, but it'll find their next question and augment their research. With this in mind, I am so excited to see what the future holds for archaeology in the Amazon. That said, the Americas are chock full of fascinating mysteries outside of the Amazon too. So I've made a whole playlist for American archaeology you can watch here. Also, feel free to subscribe to my newsletter in the description for even more content. You won't regret it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.